Hello! If you are listening to this story at night, perhaps your room is quiet. Maybe the lights have already been turned off. Maybe only a small glow remains in one corner. Before we begin, adjust your pillow just a little and take a slow, steady breath in. Tonight, we are going back to the year 1200. Not to a radiant castle, not to a battlefield, but to a small village, buried in snow. The temperature outside is minus 28 degrees Celsius. The wind moves across thatched roofs crusted with frost. The village well is frozen solid. And inside a low wooden house, beside a weak but persistent fire, there is a 90-year-old man. He has lived through more winters than anyone else in the village. And tonight, we will stay with him. This story has no great climax, no hero, only continuation within the cold. If you enjoy slow journeys like this, you can follow the channel. And before the story truly begins, tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are right now? Now, let the winter wind of the year 1200 drift gently through your mind. Night in the year 1200 has no streetlights. Imagine yourself standing in an open stretch of land covered in snow. The snow is not falling now. It has been falling for many days before this, and now the ground lies still beneath a thick white layer, faintly shimmering under a thin moonlight. The air is so cold that every breath becomes a small cloud before your face. The temperature has dropped to minus 28 degrees Celsius. At that level of cold, snow is no longer soft. But at this moment, no one steps outside. The village is still asleep. The low wooden houses, with their thick thatched roofs, huddle close together as if they too understand the fear of wind. The timber frame of each house is constructed from roughly hewn tree trunks, not perfectly straight, still retaining the natural curves of the forest. Over that lattice, a mixture of clay, chopped straw, and dried animal dung is spread, materials readily available and reasonably effective at retaining heat. In summer, those walls are a pale brown, warm and dry. But in this winter, when the temperature falls so deeply, the surface turns grayer and harder. And along the edges of the timber frames, you can see hairline cracks like thin threads. The wind does not need a large opening to enter. A narrow gap is enough to carry in the metallic scent of early morning cold. The roofs are layered with thick bundles of thatch or reed, stacked like overlapping scales. In many places, the roof is so thick that you could push your entire arm between the layers of dry straw. But where the wind is strongest, the snow is blown away, exposing dark strands of thatch, frozen and brittle beneath the frost. When closed, they are not perfectly sealed, but enough to slow the wind. Some houses have small windows. In truth, only square openings that can be covered with thick cloth or a wooden shutter when the cold is severe. Behind the houses lie small plots of land, now buried beneath snow. Farther away are the livestock shelters, sometimes sharing a roof with the main house, sometimes standing just a few steps apart. In winter, their breath forms a thin mist whenever the door opens. The entire village resembles a small organism amid a vast white expanse. Now it lies flat and silent beneath snow, not a single fresh footprint. The edge of the village opens to fields and forest. The field is now a seamless white surface. But beneath the snow lie long strips of farmland that will be plowed again in spring. The forest stands still in the distance, dark trunks stark against the snow, like a natural wall that both shelters and reminds the village that nature surrounds it on every side. If you imagine rising slightly above, you would see how small the village truly is. Each house holds a small pocket of warmth, like tiny embers in a sea of snow. And it is precisely this humility, this simplicity of materials and structure, that makes the village both fragile and resilient. Every beam of wood, every layer of plaster, every bundle of thatch is there because it is needed. In this minus 28-degree winter, those houses promise no comfort. They promise only one modest thing: if the wind is not too strong, if the fire does not go out, if the door remains closed, then life may continue inside. And so the entire village, pressed close beneath its thick blanket of snow, quietly waits for the sun to rise, as if the wooden walls and thatched roofs themselves are holding their breath alongside the people within. Only the wind. If you listen carefully, you will realize that the sound of winter is not entirely silence. It carries very small noises. Snow sliding softly from a roof, wood contracting in the cold, a piece of ice cracking somewhere in the night. In a house near the edge of the village, beneath a thick thatched roof, a thin layer of smoke escapes through an opening in the roof. In a winter like this, fire is not merely comfort. It is the heartbeat of the house. But outside, before anyone wakes to stir the embers again, the world still belongs to the cold. At minus 28 degrees, the water in a wooden bucket left outside has frozen solid. The ground beneath the snow is hard as stone. Winter is not a furious enemy charging forward. It is more like an uninvited guest who sits down in the village and refuses to leave. It says nothing. It simply waits. The low roofs are not taller than two men standing atop one another. In that darkness, people lie close together to share heat. But we are still outside. The wind continues to sweep across the field, carrying tiny grains of snow, blowing them into thin streaks that skim along the ground. The sky begins to change, very slowly. The gray line in the east widens slightly, before the light is strong enough to see a human face clearly. The village has not yet stirred. No footsteps. No doors opening. On mornings like this, no one rushes from beneath blankets, but sooner or later, someone will wake. They wake because the body knows the rhythm of winter, because the livestock must be checked before full daylight. But that moment has not yet arrived. We are in the pause between night and day. The atmosphere seems frozen, not only by temperature, but by anticipation. If you stand in the center of the village and slowly turn in a circle, you will see everything there is to see. Low thatched roofs, wooden fences, the white field, the dark forest, and the pale gray sky slowly shifting. Only a cluster of small houses within vast nature. And it is that smallness that makes the cold more visible. In great cities, thick stone walls and crowds might retain some warmth. But here, each house stands against the wind alone. Winter does not need to destroy them. The light continues to spread. Now you can see the snow on the roofs more clearly. Those footprints lead from the door to the livestock shelter. No one has gone farther. At minus 28 degrees, people move only when necessary. Another thin line of smoke begins to rise from another roof. The village is waking, but still slowly. The sun has not yet appeared. In this transitional moment, everything seems balanced between two states, sleeping and waking, dark and light, stillness and motion. The cold still dominates. If you extend your hand, you will feel it immediately. But inside those houses, human breath is beginning to warm the space slightly. Only slightly. And so, before we step inside any house, before we meet anyone, we understand the most important truth of this morning. Winter is not a moment, and this small village in the year 1200 does not seek to defeat it. They only seek to pass through it. The light is now strong enough to distinguish one roof from another. Night has retreated, but the cold remains. And somewhere inside one of those houses, a 90-year-old man is preparing to open his eyes. We will go inside shortly, but first, let this moment before dawn settle a little longer, when the whole world seems to hold its breath and only winter speaks. Inside one of those low wooden houses, where thin smoke still drifts through the thatch, the old man has awakened. Only a very slight change in the air as the deep night slowly turns toward dawn. He opens his eyes in the dense darkness, and for the first few breaths, he does not move, not listening for words, but listening to the house. The quiet creak of wood in the cold. He lies on a straw-stuffed mattress set close against the wall. It is not comfort in the way we understand it today, but for him, it is the feeling of familiarity. His back is no longer straight as it was in youth. Every morning begins with a small negotiation with the body. His knees give a faint sound as they fold. He has grown accustomed to those small sounds. They are the private language of old age. Beside him is the earthen plaster wall. But now it is cold and dry as stone. If you were to reach out and touch it, you would feel the cold seep through your skin almost at once. He does not touch it. He has known that cold for a long time. Since winters, when he was still a middle-aged man, when he could rise at once and step outside before the sun. He lies there a little longer, looking up at the ceiling. The beams above are darkened by smoke gathered over many years. In one corner, a bundle of dried herbs hangs from the previous season. Its scent is now very faint, almost gone, but he still remembers clearly when it was sharp and strong. He inhales very slowly. The air inside still carries the smell of last night's smoke, mixed with wool, wood, and a trace of dampness from the packed earth floor. It is the scent of the house, the scent of his life. Then he sits up. The coarse wool blanket slips down from his shoulders, revealing the inner layer of clothing creased from sleep. As the blanket leaves his body, the cold moves closer at once, as if it has been waiting. He pulls his garment tighter around himself before rising fully. In the dim light of early day, you can see his silver hair glint faintly, like mist. The strands that remain are fine and soft, lying close to his head, catching the last ember light in pale streaks. His forehead is higher than it was in youth. He lifts a hand and gently smooths what hair remains, not to arrange it, but out of an old habit. When he closes his eyes for a second, those lines fold over each other like layers of bark. But his eyes, though clouded now, the rims slightly red from smoke and wind, still hold a gentle, attentive clarity. He looks as someone who has looked at this room for decades, who knows exactly where everything belongs. He sets his feet onto the packed earth floor. Cold rises through the thin cloth wrapped around them. One hand rests on his knee. The other steadies itself against the wooden wall nearby. Not because he is too weak to stand, but because he has learned that balance is something to be protected. When he straightens, his back remains slightly curved, his shoulders sloping downward. He looks like an old tree that has endured many seasons of wind, no longer straight, yet still rooted firmly. He takes another breath. Morning has begun, and though the cold is waiting outside, though the wall beside him is still dry and hard as stone, he stands there in the small wooden house, with thin silver hair and hands that have lived nearly a century, and fully awake in the coldest dawn of winter. But his eyes, though dimmer than before, still keep a quiet attention. He does not hurry to stand. First, he reaches toward the central hearth of the house, only a small circular space on the packed earth floor, where last night's ash still lies in a thin gray layer. He takes a small stick left nearby and gently pushes the ash aside. Beneath it, tiny red points are still alive. He gives a very slight nod, as if receiving good news. The fire has not gone out. For him. That is always the first thing to know in the day. He draws his thick wool garment more tightly around his shoulders, and over all of it is a heavier cloak, meant to keep warmth when one must sit for long. His hands tremble slightly, but not from fear. He slowly adds a few thin twigs to the embers. His breath becomes a small white cloud, mingling with the hearth's thin smoke. The flame answers, first as a weak orange, then brightening. The first light of day inside the house does not come from the sun. As that light spreads, it touches his face, revealing each deep wrinkle like the rings on an ancient tree. He has lived through 90 winters. No one in the village remembers exactly the year he was born. Age was measured by seasons, by great events, the year of a great flood, the year of failed harvests, the year the church roof was replaced. He remembers being a boy, running barefoot across the earth in summer. He remembers the first time he held an axe, his hands still weak but full of determination. Now those hands have changed. His fingers curl slightly at the joints, as if they have held too many tools in a lifetime and can no longer fully straighten. The strength is not what it once was, but it is enough to hold, enough to set the stick exactly where it belongs atop the glowing coals. He no longer goes out to the fields. His legs are no longer quick enough for such work, and the others in the house no longer allow him to do it. But he still wakes first in the house. That habit has not left him, even as his body has slowed. That early wakefulness is no longer to prepare for the fields, but to hold the rhythm of the house. And in that short silence, before everything begins to move, he still holds his place. Not through the strength of his arms, but through a presence as steady and enduring as the fire before him. It is habit, a habit that does not leave him, even as his body slows. The others in the house are still asleep. The old man does not wake anyone. He only sits near the fire. The distance between him and the flame is small. He only needs to feel the warmth slowly entering his skin through stiff joints, through cold fingers. At this age, the cold sinks deeper. He does not say it, but he knows. So he sits nearer the fire than the others. No one complains. He tilts his head slightly, listening to the wind outside. The wind passing over the thatch makes a low, drawn-out sound. He can tell the difference between a mild wind and a strong one simply by listening in the dark. This morning, the wind is not too fierce. He exhales slowly. Each winter morning, he asks himself, "Is it colder today than yesterday?" He does not measure it in numbers. He measures it by how his chest feels when he inhales, by the stiffness of his fingers, by the sound the wood makes. He looks around the house. Tools hang on the wall. A long wooden spoon, a small knife, a bundle of rope. Everything in this house is so familiar to him that even without looking, he could picture it. The movement is slow and even, almost unconscious, yet within it lies a quiet check, not for sickness, but to confirm that this body is still here, still answering when it is touched. He is not afraid of death at 90. Death is no longer sudden or astonishing. It is like a guest standing somewhere beyond the snow-covered field, not yet at the threshold, but no longer unfamiliar. He leans forward, his hand trembling slightly yet steady as he places a larger piece of wood into the fire. The wood catches slowly. A small crack sounds as dry resin meets heat, and the light in the house grows, enough to reveal tiny dust motes floating in the air like small fragments of memory that have not yet settled. He closes his eyes for a moment, not to fall asleep again, but to rest, to feel warmth spread into his palms and up his arms. In his memory, winters layer upon winters like the snow outside. This season resembles the last, yet never matches it completely. There were years so cold the stream froze earlier than usual, years with little snow and cracked earth, years when children's voices filled the village yard, and years when the emptiness in the house grew larger because someone never returned. He has watched children grow, shoulders widening with each harvest. He has buried people older than himself in the cold ground. He has seen roofs re-thatched, fences raised and fallen, fields plowed again and again until old soil lines blurred into new. He is the one who remained, not because he was stronger or wiser, but simply because he was still there, year after year, like an old log not yet toppled by the wind. The fire now burns steadily. Warm orange light spreads, softening the harshness of the room. Behind him, someone in the house begins to stir. A small cough. Then silence, followed by the rustle of blanket cloth as someone turns. The new day is opening slowly. But for these brief minutes, before everyone fully wakes and the house grows louder, the space still belongs to him. He stretches his legs slightly, feeling a faint pull in the calves, then draws them back as the cold from the packed earth rises through thin cloth. He smiles very faintly, not from any special joy, but as a quiet acknowledgement. Winter is still there, relentless and enduring, but so is he. And so, beside the central hearth, within thin smoke and gentle orange light, the 90-year-old man sits with his hands open toward the flame, as if holding something fragile yet unextinguished. His day begins like that. No trumpet, no proclamation, only steady breath and a small fire that continues to burn. As the morning light spreads a little wider, the village comes into clearer view beneath the heavy snow, not like a vivid painting, but like a sketch in charcoal and white chalk. Snow does not only lie on rooftops, it settles on every surface capable of holding it. Where the roof has sagged slightly with age, snow gathers into rounded mounds, like small pillows stacked upon one another, silent, so perfectly balanced that it seems a single loud sound could make them slide. When the weak morning light touches them, they reflect a cold, muted brightness, not glittering, but quiet and clear, like winter itself. Snow clings to door frames as well, lying deep on the horizontal wooden beam at the front of each house, filling in the low steps where people usually climb up and down. The wooden barrels left on the porch, the posts used to tie livestock, even a handcart leaning beside one house. All of them wear a white cap, softening their familiar shapes, smoothing their edges. Even the dry branches reaching out from the earthen plaster wall hold thin streaks of snow, making them appear thicker and heavier than they truly are. Winter does not choose. It covers everything, large and small, from the highest roof to the shovel resting against a wall. The dirt road running through the village is now only a flat white strip, seamless, as if no human foot has ever crossed it. But if you look closely, if you bend down and let the light strike the surface at an angle, you can still see where the snow has been compacted, where yesterday's footsteps left their marks. The deepest part remains, but the rim has faded, like a memory slowly dissolving. Near one doorway, larger footprints press deeper, suggesting the walker carried weight, perhaps a full bucket of water or a small bundle of firewood. The snow there has been disturbed more, because animals have moved, at least a little, through the day. Near the well, the snow bears imperfect circles where someone stood waiting, turned in place, or set a wooden bucket down for a moment. There, the snow is no longer smooth. It is speckled with small fragments of ice, broken underfoot and frozen again. And there are small footprints too, shallow, slightly uneven in rhythm, perhaps a child's. Those footprints do not go far, yet they remain, like a faint line of ink on a white page. When the wind passes, a thin veil of powdery snow slides lightly across the surface, slipping into the hollows and covering a little more. Snow does not erase footprints at once. It does so slowly, bit by bit, as if time itself moves more slowly in winter. If you stand in the middle of that road and turn in a slow circle, you will see every trace of yesterday gradually blending into today's stillness. They still tell small stories of movement in the cold. Someone stepped outside despite the temperature. Someone carried water home before darkness settled fully. Someone checked the livestock shelter one last time before closing the door. And now, before the new footprints of today are pressed into it, the road lies quiet beneath its thick snow, holding in silence the smallest motions of human life in the deepest winter. At the center of the village is an open patch of ground, a place where, in other seasons, people gather to trade seed, mend tools, or simply stand and talk while the sun is still high. Now that space is flat and still, buried in snow so completely you can no longer tell where the center ends and the edge begins. The post is now half submerged in snow, its shadow stretching faintly across the white. The houses face inward toward one another, forming an unofficial ring, as if they have drawn closer to escape the wind from the open field. The gaps between them are wide enough for people to pass, but not so wide that the wind can run straight toward each door. This arrangement was not drawn up in ink or planned on paper. It formed over years, as each family built near the best shelter they could find. In one corner of the village, nearer the forest edge, stand smaller houses, where families with fewer people or fewer possessions live. Snow lies on them as heavily as everywhere else, yet their shapes are slightly more uneven, because the timber frames beneath are not perfectly straight. Near the well, a circle of snow is more disturbed than elsewhere. A thin rim of ice lines the well's mouth, and sometimes someone must use the handle of an axe or a piece of wood to strike it gently and break the seal before lowering the bucket. A little farther on, the livestock shelter sits close against the backs of the houses, like an extension of them. From a few small gaps in its roof, you can see vapor rising, not smoke, but the breath of cattle and sheep meeting the cold air. The wooden fences around gardens and pens now rise only as dark lines against the white. Winter is not the season to rebuild fences. Winter is the season to keep everything as it is and wait. The forest at the village edge forms a natural wall. It softens the wind from one side, and at the same time reminds the village that beyond this place, the world is wider and colder. If you stand at the village edge and look out across the field, you will see a vast emptiness that makes the village seem small. That fragility does not make the village weak. It only makes its existence more striking. Every roof holds its own story. The older thatch is darker. In some places it shows through. In others it disappears beneath deeper snow, creating an uneven surface. Some roofs are lower than the rest, belonging to smaller houses where the thatch is a little thinner. Each bundle of reed. Each timber beam is a thin barrier between the deep cold outside and the warm breath of the people within. The morning light continues to spread, slowly, without haste. Details that were vague in darkness, the outline of thatch, the edge of wooden doors, the dry trunks of trees, now appear sharper, yet still gentle. The snow reflects that light, brightening the entire village in a restrained way where the snow is thick and smooth. The surface almost seems to glow. And if you stare too long, your eyes will sting. Each roof, each shadow, each bright patch of reflected snow contributes to a picture that is quiet and balanced. And within that gradual brightening, you can feel more clearly what the roofs are doing. Not challenging winter in defiance, but enduring it in silence. They stand there beneath heavy snow, holding a fragile warmth inside, while the cold morning light glides over them, gentle and steady, as if reminding the village that a new day has begun. Little by little, the village begins to move. A door opens, not wide. The first footsteps of the day leave deep impressions in the snow, clear and sharp compared to older prints softened by wind. From another roof, thicker smoke begins to rise. A small sound carries, the chop of wood, perhaps, or the dull thud of something heavy set down on the floor. Yet even with those movements, the village keeps the winter's characteristic stillness. Snow absorbs sound, softening it, making it seem farther away than it truly is. In one corner of the yard, a small, shaggy dog steps out from its shelter. The sky is now fully light, but the sun remains low and weak. The village beneath its heavy snow is like a body waking slowly. And in the middle of it all, among white-covered thatch and compacted paths, between the silent forest and the flat field, the village still exists. In the -28-degree cold of a winter morning in the year 1200, that is already something immense. Inside the low wooden house, on the packed earth floor hardened by cold, there is a circle darker than the rest, the place where the fire has burned through the night. There is no raised stone hearth, no chimney to draw smoke upward the way later centuries would build them. Only a central fire pit, ringed by tamped earth and ash accumulated over many years. Here, fire is not warmth in the luxurious sense. If the fire were to die completely in the deep night of minus 28 degrees, the house would not merely become a little colder. The floor would no longer be simply the ground beneath a home, but a cold stone holding fast to the night's temperature. Rising would no longer be a familiar motion, but a small trial of the body. And morning. Instead of beginning with the crack of wood and gentle orange light, would begin with shivering. The rope that hangs the water bucket would stiffen like a wooden rod. And so, the fire is never allowed to go out. Keeping the fire is not merely habit. It is a responsibility passed from one generation to the next, almost without needing to be spoken. They do not wait until the fire is nearly gone before thinking of how to keep it alive through the night. Large logs are drawn closer to the center, not tossed in carelessly, but placed with attention. If set too straight, the fire will flare too quickly and then fail when it runs out of breath. If set too far away, the coals will cool before they can pass on their heat. They learned how to place firewood as children. With each winter, the hands grow familiar with the weight of wood. The eyes grow familiar with the color of embers, knowing when the fire is strong enough, when it needs more, when it must be left alone. Last night, they did not let the flame rise high enough to flood the entire house with light. Ash becomes a gray blanket, holding the heat beneath and shielding it from the drafts slipping through the door's seams. The house sinks into darkness, leaving only a faint red glow, like a small eye open in the night. Not bright enough to show anyone's face clearly, but enough to warm a small circle around it. In that darkness, they sleep with the faith that when they open their eyes, they will not have to begin again from nothing. Because kindling a new fire in cold this deep is not only a matter of flint and dry grass. When hands are numb, when fingers lose feeling from cold, creating even a tiny spark can become far slower and far more difficult. And in that time, the cold continues to spread through the house. So they do not let the fire go out. It is a quiet patience, a steady rhythm of winters joined one to the next. And when the house sinks into sleep, the fire does not sleep with them. This morning, when the ash is pushed aside and that small red glow appears, it is not a miracle. It is the result of careful preparation through the night, of hands that understand the limits of wood and coal, of a simple tradition that endures. At minus 28 degrees, life begins from a small red point like that. Ash is the fire's blanket. When the flame weakens, they use a wooden stick to gently push ash over the embers that still glow red. Ash holds heat, blocks drafts, and allows the spark to survive the long hours of night. This morning, when the old man pushes the ash aside, he is not searching for a tall flame, and he finds it. The fire does not need to be large to exist. He adds a few small sticks first. Smaller wood catches more quickly, and it does not steal too much heat from the heart of the coals. Those sticks were split earlier, dried through the summer, stacked near the wall inside the house to keep them from dampness. Wet wood smokes more and burns poorly. They know that. When dry wood touches hot coals, a very small crack sounds. Then, a thin spark appears, slips through a gap in the wood, meets the cold air, and rises into a slender flame. The smoke thickens slightly. There is no chimney to carry all the smoke straight upward. And so, the upper part of the house always holds a thin layer of smoke, darkening the beams over the years. But smoke has its own benefits. It dries the thatch from within, drives away insects, and keeps the wood from rotting too quickly. The old man knows how to sit lower than the thickest layer of smoke. He draws a larger piece of wood into the heart of the fire, placing it so one end touches the remaining embers. Fire needs air, and in this wind-shielded house, every small gap matters. The flame grows. Pale orange light touches the packed earth floor, reflects against the walls, and makes shadows dance slowly. Not sharp, strong shadows, but soft ones, swaying with the fire's breathing. One of the younger people in the house wakes and sits nearer the fire. The first task of morning is always the same: keep the fire. Wood is taken from the stack along the wall, one piece at a time. Outside, the wind can numb hands in only minutes. But within this small circle of light, warmth begins to spread, slowly, steadily. The packed earth floor near the fire grows slightly warmer than the edges by the wall. Their breath no longer shows so clearly as smoke as it did when the fire was weak. Fire is also where water is heated. An iron pot or a clay pot hangs from an iron hook above. Cold water drawn from the well, when set near the fire, will not freeze again as quickly as it would farther away. The sound of boiling does not come at once. Then, if you listen closely, you can hear water moving gently inside the pot. Fire governs the rhythm of the house. When the fire is strong, people sit closer, work nearer the center, mending clothes, sharpening a knife, tying rope. When the fire weakens, they pull blankets tighter and reduce their movement. No one turns fully away from the fire in this winter. The old man sits closest. At 90, he no longer does heavy work, but he holds the memory of winters when the fire went out and had to be born again from the beginning. Kindling a new fire in deep winter is not easy. When the fire has died completely, the house sinks into a thick cold, and every movement becomes slow. In -28-degree cold, hands tremble not only from age, but because the temperature pulls warmth away from fingertips. And so, keeping fire through the night is always easier than building it again from the beginning. Keeping fire is keeping continuity between night and day. The fire now burns evenly, not too high, not too low. Its orange light brightens the floor near the center, leaving faint circles of light that spread outward and fade into shadow near the walls. That light does not travel far beyond the house's center. But the central space, where people sit, where water is warmed, where hands are held over heat, is bright enough and warm enough for day to begin. Within this small circle, the cold does not disappear, but it is pushed back by one step. Thin smoke continues to rise, curling around the blackened beams before finding its way through the thatch outdoors. That thread of smoke rises straight and slender, clearer in the cold air, before slowly dissolving into the gray sky. In morning light, the smoke is not pure white, but faintly bluish, like a thin strand sewing the house to the sky. To anyone passing through the village, that column of smoke is the clearest sign of life, and in this deep winter, the absence of smoke is not ordinary. And so, each slender column rising from a thatched roof is not merely the result of burning wood. It is a quiet declaration that the house continues, that night has passed and morning has been kept by a small fire, steady and enduring. And when fire goes out in this winter, it is rarely only a minor mishap. Inside, fire changes everything in subtle ways. The skin of hands near the flame becomes less tight. The old man brings his hands closer to the fire, turning his palms, then the backs of his hands, as if warming each part in turn. He says nothing, but in his eyes there is a small satisfaction. Not great joy, only the confirmation that another day has begun the right way. Outside, snow remains deep, but inside this house, there is a small circle where winter does not completely rule. Fire does not make winter disappear. It only creates a space within the cold, a space large enough for people to sit closer together, large enough for water to boil, large enough for mourning to happen. And so, the fire must continue. Only burning, even and enduring, like the heartbeat of the house in the winter of the year 1200. When the fire has settled into a steady burn and its warm orange light spreads beyond the central hearth, the house slowly shifts from sleep into preparation. Winter does not allow hurried or abundant meals. Everything is slow, carefully measured, and repeated almost every day. The pot is hung from an iron hook above the fire. It is not a shining pot, but one darkened by smoke, with a thick, heavy base. The woman of the house, or someone younger if she is tired, draws the pot closer, checks inside, then pours in a little water taken from the well the day before and left near the fire through the night so it will not freeze completely. The water is not as clear as summer stream water. The water warms gradually. A thin veil of steam rises, making the air near the fire a little more damp. From a cloth bag hanging near the wall, they take out dried barley. They know by sight and by experience how much is needed today. No more, no less. The grain is poured into the pot when the water has only begun to warm. The fire burns just enough to keep the water hot and let the grain soften over time. A soft, stirring sound rises as a long wooden spoon touches the bottom of the pot. The spoon is carved from hard wood, thick in the shaft, rounded at the end, and worn smooth by years of use. Each turn of the spoon is steady, unhurried. After the barley comes dried beans, if any remain. Beans bring a longer fullness, a bit more strength to face the cold. From the small earth cellar behind the house, a large turnip is carried in. They cut away the root end and any spoiled spots, then slice the rest into smaller pieces so it will soften faster in the pot. Pale ivory slices drop into the warming water, forming light rings that float among the grains. If the household still has a little salted pork, it is taken out on the deepest cold days. The meat is hung high near the roof, where smoke keeps it dry and insects away. Before it goes into the pot, it is dipped briefly in warm water to lessen the salt, then cut into smaller pieces. Meat is meant to last for weeks, not for one meal. When the meat falls into the pot, the smell changes instantly. Even if it is only a small piece, before that, The steam carried only the faint scent of grain, slowly softening and turnip dissolving into warm water. The rising steam now carries the scent of grain, of vegetables, of salt, and of wood smoke burning beneath the pot. Those layers of smell merge together, filling the space inside the house that is still cold and bare. The smell of food in winter is not only for pleasure. It covers the odor of cold earth and old smoke, creating warmth not only through heat, but through feeling. Even before a bowl reaches the lips, the body responds. The stomach tightens slightly. The hand grips the spoon more firmly. The eyes soften just a little. That small piece of meat does not turn the pot into luxury. But in a long winter, even a little fat and salt is enough to make the food feel more complete. When the spoon moves through them, they break apart and blend into grain and vegetables, deepening the broth just a little. It is simply a stew, pottage, the food that has sustained generations of farmers through one cold season after another. It changes by season, by year, by the luck or harshness of the previous harvest. Some days, the pot holds only water and barley, with a few dried greens left over. But the structure barely changes. Water as the base, grain as the body, vegetables as softness, and, if fortune allows, a little meat as depth, because the pot is almost never completely empty. Each day carries a little of the day before inside it. The stew becomes a continuous chain, not sharply divided meal by meal, but flowing from one to the next like the days of winter themselves. As steam rises, it carries more than the scent of food. It softens the air around the fire. The house, once cold, gains a light layer of moisture that makes the skin less dry, the breath less sharp. The smell of pottage becomes a reminder that although snow is deep and wind is cruel outside, something inside is still simmering, still moving, still nourishing. And so, in that low wooden house, the pot of pottage is not only breakfast, it is the rhythm that binds fire to people, the harvest that is past to the spring that is still far away, scarcity to sufficiency, a simple dish, yet enough to keep the winter day going. While the stew simmers softly, the household sits closer to the fire. If the fire weakens, they add a small stick. Each time the spoon touches the side of the pot, a low, deep note rings out and then fades. Dark bread from the day before is brought down from the wooden shelf near the wall, where it is kept, raised above the ground to avoid dampness. The crumb inside is not airy like the white bread of wealthier regions. It is compact, heavy, and slightly moist at the center, made from barley or wheat mixed with rye, depending on the harvest. To cut the bread, they use a short knife. The blade, not truly sharp, but firm enough. Those crumbs can be gathered, dropped into the pot, or saved for later. The bread is dark, nearly brown-gray, and when brought close to the nose, it carries a faint sourness from naturally fermented dough. In winter, bread is never thrown away. They know yesterday's bread will differ from today's, and they adjust the way they eat accordingly. When the stew has softened enough, when the barley has swollen and the turnip is no longer hard, the bread is torn into smaller pieces. Those pieces are dropped into bowls or dipped directly into the pot, where steam still rises. The bread is not cooked again with the stew. When the piece is lifted, it has darkened slightly. The surface deepened in color from the stew it has taken in. Steam rises from the wet bread, carrying the scent of grain, vegetables, and meat. The bread becomes a bridge between food and fire. It carries the pot's heat and the flavor of the entire house. For the old man, the bread is soaked a little longer. In that house, no one eats bread alone. Bread always comes with the stew, with the burning fire, with warm breath in cold air. Bread is not only food, it is an extension of the previous harvest, the grain that was sown, reaped, ground, and baked. When dipped into winter pottage, it binds the warm months that are gone to the cold day that is here. And so, in a -28-degree morning, yesterday's dark bread, hard and plain, becomes soft and warm once more. Enough to keep the body moving, enough for a winter day to begin. The old man is given a small wooden bowl. Across its surface remain fine scratches, traces of countless times it has been set down on the floor. Washed with cold water, dried with coarse cloth, the wood has absorbed the smell of smoke and food through many winters, and when steam rises from the stew, that scent stirs again, faintly, like an old layer of memory blending into the present. He holds the bowl with both hands. His slightly curved fingers wrap around the rim. His palms press against the wood as it warms from the stew inside. Steam touches his face, leaving the thin skin of his cheeks and chin lightly damp. He inhales very slowly, as though the smell itself is part of the meal. He eats slowly. His rhythm is not the rhythm of the young. And in this house, they have long grown used to that. He has few teeth left, and the ones that remain are no longer strong as they once were. He lifts the spoon to his lips, tilts the bowl just enough not to spill, and brings the food into his mouth with care. Not because the food is extraordinary, but because he has learned that every winter meal is part of continuation. When he swallows, he exhales lightly, the moisture of his breath blending with the steam rising from the bowl. He turns the bowl slightly between his palms, feeling heat seep into the joints of his fingers. At times, he looks into the bowl as though looking at something long familiar. He has eaten bowls like this through so many winters, in different houses, among faces that have changed over years. He does not speak while eating, but his eyes occasionally lift toward the fire. There is a harmony between his slow movements and the fire's steady burn. When the bowl is nearly empty, he does not tip it sharply to scrape out the last. Then he holds the bowl a little longer to enjoy the last warmth lingering at the bottom. In this winter, a small bowl of stew is not only food. For him, it is the sign that morning has begun the right way, that the house still has fire, that his body, slow and old, still answers by chewing, swallowing, and holding on to warmth. He sets the bowl down on the floor near the fire, slowly, without making a loud sound. Then he reaches his hands toward the flame once more, as if closing the meal with the very warmth that made it. Breath still shows faintly in the cold air, but not as thick as it was before the fire strengthened. The sound of spoons against bowls, swallowing, the soft crackle of fire, these are the main sounds. No one eats until they are uncomfortably full, enough to have strength to go to the livestock shelter, to carry water, to split more wood. What remains in the pot is saved for the next meal, or for evening. Afterward, the pot is not washed immediately. Each day, The pot is almost never completely empty. The fire keeps burning. The smell of pottage lingers in the air. Outside, snow remains white and hard. But inside this house, a small stew has been cooked. A simple meal has been shared, and the cold has stepped back once again. Winter does not disappear, but through fire and warm food, it becomes something that can be endured. And the day, no matter how cold, begins with a pot of stew like this. As the brief winter day slowly draws to a close, the light outside does not vanish abruptly. It fades gradually, retreating from the fields, from the forest's edge, from the snow-covered roofs, until only a deep gray remains stretched across the sky. Inside the low wooden house, no one waits for complete darkness before preparing for the night. Winter does not allow delay. The fire is drawn a little closer toward the center. The house begins to fold in on itself like a body curling beneath a blanket. Supper is not much different from morning. What remains of the stew pot is pulled closer to the fire, the lid lifted so steam can rise again. If the stew has thickened after hours of cooling, a little water is added, not much, only enough to thin it and help the heat spread evenly. Steam rises once more, carrying the familiar smell that has filled the house since early morning. The remaining bread is torn apart, the crust harder than it was in the morning after spending the whole day exposed to air, in the deep of winter. The most precious thing is not variety, but the fact that today resembles yesterday closely enough to prove that everything is still continuing. The body has worked all day, carrying water, splitting wood, cleaning the livestock shelter, and now it needs rest. When a bowl is empty, it is set down near the fire to keep the last trace of warmth in its wooden sides. But after eating, the work is not finished. Someone sits close to the fire, pulling a thick wool garment into their lap. The right sleeve has a small tear near the elbow, perhaps caught on the edge of the barn door or a wooden frame. But in winter, any gap in clothing is a place where cold can slip in. Needle and thread are taken from a small cloth pouch hanging from a wooden peg. Firelight is not as steady as an oil lamp, and certainly not like daylight. When the needle passes through, there is a familiar sensation at the fingertips, slightly stiff, slightly rough, but safe. The mender does not look up often. Their gaze stays fixed on each stitch, as though this is the only thing that exists in that moment. Wool clothing in winter cannot be spared. When the tear is closed, the mender does not stop immediately. This carefulness is not perfectionism. It is knowledge that in minus 28 degrees, a small mistake can become serious. Meanwhile, the others do not sit idle. Someone uses a small knife to shave away excess wood from the handle of a tool. The old man watches these movements from his place near the fire. Sometimes he offers a short instruction. Pull the thread a little tighter, or don't place the stitch too close to the edge. Not because he doubts them, but because the habit of teaching still remains. Firelight reflects on the taut thread between two fingers, on the small piece of metal, on the dark wool. But inside, under that uneven glow, each stitch binds not only a sleeve, but the household's preparation for tomorrow. Night in the wooden house is not a time of complete leisure. And in that repeated, stable rhythm, winter is faced day by day. not through grand actions, but through each stitch, each piece of bread, each slow stir of the stew pot. Someone else checks the leather shoes set near the door. Leather stiffens in the cold. And if it is not greased or softened near the fire, it can crack. Everything is done in silence, not from sadness, but to save breath in cold air. The old man remains near the fire. He sat there by day, and when night comes, he is still in that place. Only the wind sliding over the thatch and the soft crackle of fire. The darkness inside is not completely black. The roof beams above seem higher in the fire's glow, because shadow softens their edges. The smallest child is wrapped more tightly in blankets. The mother pulls the covering up to the child's chin, then rests a hand on the child's chest for a second, as if to be sure the breathing is steady. In this winter, sleep is not only rest, it is a way of conserving energy, of not spending too much strength in the cold. When the mending, the shoe checking, and the arranging of firewood are finished, everyone begins to prepare their sleeping places. Straw mattresses are dragged a little closer to the fire, but not too close, to avoid stray sparks. Sleeping positions are chosen by habit, the old and the very young in the warmer places, the stronger ones along the outer edge. He watches the fire a little longer. In that firelight, he can see winters that came before. The house may have been repaired a few times, but the night's rhythm remains the same. Someone speaks softly a few words, not of anything grand, only that tomorrow they must bring more straw into the livestock shelter, or that they should check the well earlier because the cold is deepening. No one tells long stories in the depth of winter like this. But in deep winter, words are weighed like firewood, only as much as needed. So the house settles into a silence that is not heavy, but practical. The silence of people who understand they must keep warm, must let the body rest, must let the fire do its work. There is only the crackle of flame, the quiet shift of wood as it burns, the wind scraping the thatch, and now and then the sound of someone turning on a straw mattress. But sometimes, the old man speaks a single, short sentence. Not a long tale with a clear beginning and end, only a light remark, as though he is speaking to the fire itself. The wind changed direction earlier this year. Or, there was a year when the snow lay so deep it covered the fence. His voice is not raised, not seeking attention. It is low, rougher than before, but steady. Everyone listens. When he mentions a colder year, the house seems to pause for an extra beat. When he says that one year the snow came late, or that one year the well froze deeper than this, he is not boasting. He is simply placing the present winter inside a longer chain. Sometimes he offers a small fragment of memory, not complete, only like a cut slice of the past. That year, the old cow didn't make it through the third night. Or, we had to share firewood with the house next door. Then he stops, as if the sentence is enough. In the flickering light, his face appears more deeply lined when he remembers. The younger ones listen not because the stories are new, but each time they hear them again, they settle into the present winter, like a reminder that this cold, no matter how deep, is not the first time. His voice carries continuity. In that wooden house, where earthen walls hold the smell of smoke and thatch holds the snow. Continuity matters more than entertainment. He ties his own breath to the breath of those who once lay here before him. Sometimes he says only one sentence about the wind. If it sounds like this, the sky will clear tomorrow. No one verifies it at once, but they trust him, not because he is always right, but because he has listened to the wind through 90 winters. At last, the fire is lowered. The house slowly sinks into deeper darkness. Everyone lies down, bodies turn toward the fire. Even though the fire is now only a dim red glow, each person's breath blends into the shared air, forming a very thin layer of warmth just above the blanket surfaces. The old man lies on his side, his back toward the plastered earth wall, his face toward the center of the house. He listens, the sound of wood tightening in the cold. Those sounds are so familiar that if one were missing, he would notice. Outside, snow reflects the last faint light of the night sky. But inside, the only light comes from the fire. The night stretches long. Sometimes the old man opens his eyes when he hears a log crack more sharply than usual. The motion is slow and careful so as not to wake the others. Keeping the fire through the night is not the task of one person alone. And so he becomes the house's unofficial fire watcher. Outside, the wind continues to move over the white field. But within these walls of wood and plastered earth, there is a small circle of warmth, of breath, of bodies lying close together. The night is not perfectly peaceful, but it is steady. And in the deep darkness of winter in the year 1200, inside these low wooden walls, life continues without noise, kept alive by a small fire and by people lying close enough to share their warmth. When the wooden door opens in the morning, the cold air pours in like an invisible flood. Snow cries out beneath the feet, dry and crisp, like the breaking of a thin skin of ice. And behind the house, where the livestock shelter leans against the windward wall, the animals have been waiting since before the light appeared. The shelter is not built far from the home. In many villages of that time, livestock were kept close, sometimes under the same roof, sometimes sharing a wall. The body heat of cattle, sheep, or goats is a quiet source of heat in the deepest nights. The barn door opens slowly. The smell of dried grass, manure, and the warm breath of animals touches the nose at once, strong but familiar. The old cow standing closest turns its head. The straw beneath its hooves was changed the day before, but in this cold, it quickly becomes damp in places where body heat melts snow, only for it to freeze again. Someone from the household carries in a large bundle of hay, and so hay is never taken with a careless hand. The bundle is placed into a wooden trough. The steady sound of chewing fills the enclosed space, mixing with breath and the shuffle of hooves on straw. If there are sheep or goats, they are kept in a separate corner, smaller, but no less important. A goat may tremble slightly, not from weakness, but because its body is adjusting to hold heat. Damp hair in hard frost can be dangerous. The old man is no longer the one who carries the heavy hay bundles, but he is often the one who steps in last, standing for a moment to watch. If the breath is too fast, if the animal huddles in an unusual way, he will notice. He has known more animals in his life than people he ever counted. He remembers the years when feed had to be divided into smaller portions, when the trough emptied faster than expected, Water is another task that must be done at once. A bucket of water carried out from the house begins to freeze very quickly if left in the open air. If the well is frozen over at the mouth, they must break that ice before lowering the bucket. The cow drinks slowly, its wide tongue lapping the water in a steady rhythm. Manure in the shelter is gathered to one side, not completely cleaned out every day in deep winter, because that would cost too much strength. But the wettest layer must be replaced with dry straw so that cold does not creep up into legs and belly. Someone uses a wooden rake to pull out the damp straw and lay fresh straw over it. The shelter is not a place of perfect stillness. It has its own rhythm, its own sounds. If there are chickens, they are kept in a more enclosed corner. There are not many eggs in winter, but each one is precious. Someone checks the straw nest, gently lifts an egg if there is one, and places it in a cloth-lined basket to carry back into the house. Sometimes the old man bends down and lays a light hand against the cow's back. The hair is coarse and slightly stiff at the surface, but inside is the steady heat of a large body working without pause to keep itself alive. His hand, thin and dry, still carries a trace of warmth from the fire onto his skin. It merely shifts its weight from one leg to the other and continues chewing, as if that touch is part of the morning's rhythm. Only a brief touch, like a quiet acknowledgement that this animal too is living through the winter with them. It does not know minus 28 degrees the way humans do, but it knows the cold through the body. It also needs dry straw, water that does not freeze, and a door sealed against wind. In this winter, humans and livestock do not stand on opposite sides. They endure the same condition. Sometimes he leaves his hand on the cow's side a moment longer, just to feel the steady breathing. Outside the shelter, snow remains white and silent. But inside the small space of the shelter, there is motion, breath, a rhythm of life different from the stillness of the field. Not loud, but enough to know life is still working inside the cold that surrounds it. The warmth in the shelter is not as strong as inside a house with fire, but it exists. It gathers low to the ground, in animal breath, in the thick straw bedding gently fermenting beneath. It is heavier, more humid, and slightly warmer. When the feeding and straw changing are done, the barn door is closed carefully. They look back once more into the interior, as if to be certain every animal is where it should be. No wind is allowed to blow directly through. A small space between two planks is enough to create a cold draft that lasts all night. A hand runs along the door's edge, feeling for the place where the air is colder. If a larger gap is found, an old piece of cloth, once a sleeve, once a scarf, may be stuffed into it. The cloth will stiffen through the night from dampness and cold, but it will still do its work. A wooden bar is set into the proper groove, not to stop thieves in this winter, but to keep the door from shuddering when the wind rises. A door pounding again and again through the night can frighten livestock, and panic in the shelter is something no one wants. When everything is finished, the household steps out and pulls cloaks tighter around their shoulders. Snow beneath their feet cries out again, dry and hard. The old man is the last to step out. He has lived long enough to know that small things, a gap left uncovered, a trough left unfilled, can become large things when night comes. Then he turns his back to the shelter and walks slowly toward the wooden house, where smoke still rises from the thatch. Back inside the home, The smell of the barn clings to clothing. That smell is the assurance that tomorrow there will still be milk, still draft strength, still wool, still eggs. In the winter of the year 1200, livestock are not merely property. If an animal weakens, the entire household will feel it in the weeks that follow. And so every morning, before thinking of anything else, they step out onto the snow and into the shelter, and among frost clinging to the roofs, among white breath rising into cold air, humans and animals endure together, sharing winter, sharing warmth, sharing one more day that is kept. The livestock shelter in winter is not only a place to hold animals. Each animal inside represents something specific. Milk in spring, pulling strength when the ground softens, wool for warm clothing, manure for the next season's crop. In the 13th century, a cow is not simply an animal, it is insurance for the future. The layer of straw beneath the cattle is laid thicker in winter. Medieval people did not call it heat-producing fermentation, but they understood through experience that a shelter should not be too clean in the cold season. A slightly deeper floor holds warmth better than bare ground. The old man knows this. He can no longer bend for long the way he once did. But he watches. He listens to each animal's breathing, because sickness in winter arrives more quietly than in summer. When strong winds shift direction, cold air can push through the shelter's seams, not to seal everything tight, because the shelter still needs ventilation, but to soften the direct draft. The old cow chews slowly, each rotation of its jaw producing a steady sound. In some homes, shelters are built close to the wall behind the hearth, so warmth from the fire can pass through earthen plaster. Not a perfect system, but enough to keep the shelter from dropping to outdoor temperatures. If there are pigs, they are kept in a more enclosed space, because pigs tolerate cold worse than cattle. Another essential in winter is water. The well is not always easy to access. Sometimes the trough is placed nearer the barn door to take advantage of the slightly warmer air inside before the water begins forming a thin, crystalline film on the surface. The old man remembers years when the well froze deeper. Some winters, people had to build a small fire right beside the well mouth to soften the ice before lowering the bucket. But if livestock have no water, milk decreases, and spring pulling strength will be weaker. In deep winter, caring for animals is not merely routine. It is a survival rhythm that runs parallel to keeping the fire alive in the home. When the younger ones bring in fresh straw, the old man watches how they spread it. Straw must be arranged so that when an animal lies down, the belly and chest are protected from the coldest ground. Chickens, if they still lay eggs in winter, are often kept closer to the house. Winter eggs are fewer and smaller, but each one is precious. When the work in the shelter is done, people often stand there for a moment, not to rest, but to listen. The old man understands that language. He has lost animals in past winters. When the door is closed and the household returns to the wooden house, a small balance is preserved. Nothing grand has happened, but everything has been necessary. Outside, the fields are still a white expanse, but inside the shelter, warm breath continues to fog the air. Inside the house, the fire continues to burn. Humans and livestock exist side by side in the winter of 1200. Warmth, smell, sound, everything mixes into a system that is small but resilient. And the old man, with his slow steps and thin hands, remains part of that rhythm. He no longer lifts the heavy hay bundles, but he keeps something more important: attention in deep winter. Attention saves more lives than strength. Outside, the wind continues to move over the hardened snow. But in the small shelter pressed against the wooden house, life still chews slowly, breathes steadily, and waits for another season. There are nights in winter when time seems to stretch longer than usual. Not because a clock slows down. There is no clock in that low wooden house in the year 1200 to measure the hours. But because the darkness does not withdraw as quickly as people hope. The winter night is thick and deep, as if it has a weight of its own. When everyone has lain down, and the fire is only a red core smoldering beneath a layer of ash, the house enters its slowest rhythm. He lies on his side, the blanket pulled tight to his throat, the edge of the fabric brushing the dry, wrinkled skin of his chin. His back feels the earthen-plastered wall, cold, yet familiar. It is there as part of the house, not an enemy, but a presence that has always been. The wall's surface is not perfectly smooth. There are slight bulges, fine cracks from time and from the earth's tightening and loosening as it turns damp then dry, warm then cold. He does not touch it, but through the thin cloth against his back he knows the exact location of every rough point. Whenever the wind shifts, he can hear the change before he can feel it on his skin. Not a loud howl, but a very faint alteration in tone, as if the current of air is sliding along the thatched roof at a different angle. When it passes the forest edge and curls into the village, it carries a soft, distant rustle of branches. In the night, when everything else is quiet, small sounds become clearer. The wooden frame breathes out tiny cracks as the temperature changes. He lies there, eyes open in the dark, listening to those sounds the way others listen to the beat of their own heart. This may be the coldest night of the week. At this age, it matters less which night is colder than how he has stayed awake through it. There are years he still remembers clearly, certain nights that stood apart, when the well froze deeper, when the fire nearly died, when the livestock fell silent for too long. But he no longer records them in his mind as he once did. From time to time, he opens his eyes and looks toward the center of the house. Only enough to ensure that by morning, the house will not be completely cold. Outside, night lays over the white fields a very faint sheen of moonlight or starlight. If the sky is not too clouded, that light is not strong enough to cast sharp shadows, but it is enough to draw the outlines of fences, roofs, and the forest edge as pale shapes in the dark. Snow reflects what little light there is and holds it on its cold, flat surface, so the field does not sink entirely into black. Instead, everything takes on a silvery gray, as if the world has been covered with a thin sheet of cloth. Where the dirt road runs through the village, the snow glimmers very lightly. It is no longer clear who passed there. Only shallow impressions remain, like memory left behind on a white surface. The sky, if clear, opens high and still. Deep snow softens the world. It swallows echoes, makes any footsteps, if there were any, become muted and brief. But tonight there are no footsteps. No one passes through the village at this hour. Smoke from the roofs has thinned as the fire has shrunk, leaving only a faint trace if one looks closely. There is no movement in the field. No wild animal dares step out from the forest edge when the cold is so deep. Only the wind. The wind does not blow in violent gusts. It glides over the snow like an invisible current. As it slips through bare branches at the forest edge, there comes a rustling sound, very far away, very thin. Sometimes a dusting of fine snow is lifted from the surface and carried in a low, thin veil close to the ground, then falls back almost at once. The movement is so quick and light that, without close attention, you could miss it. In that wide, white space, the night is not savage. It only exists, deep, cold, and enduring. The field, once green in summer, is now a plain without markers, only a seamless white layer stretching to the forest's darker edge. And within that silence, the small village rests in the middle of the field like a cluster of low shadows, each house holding a small point of warmth inside. The night is not completely black, but it is deep enough to make everything feel farther away, smaller, quieter. And in that pale, silvery light, winter continues to extend itself, unhurried, unchanged, simply waiting for morning to arrive, no matter how slowly. In the shelter, the livestock lie quieter as well. The cow may shift its legs from time to time, but for most of the night, it holds itself in a posture that saves heat. Inside the house, time moves without anyone counting it. At times, the old man slips into a short sleep. In that sleep, he does not dream complicated things, only simple images. A summer field that is greener, water that runs louder, a sun that lingers longer in the sky. He wakes when a piece of wood gives a soft crack. He listens. A winter night is not loud, but it is not perfectly silent. And then, very slowly, change begins, not light at once, but a softening of darkness. He opens his eyes and looks toward the door. A very thin gray line appears at the door's edge, where morning light slips through the smallest crack. Not golden light, but the pale white light of snow reflecting the sky. He does not rush to sit up. He pulls the blanket from his shoulder and feels the cold touch his skin at once. With familiar movements, he pushes the ash aside and adds a small piece of wood. This time, he blows more gently than in the night, because he no longer needs absolute silence. Outside, the light increases by one small degree. When the youngest person in the house shifts and gives a faint cough, the old man is already sitting upright by the fire. He looks at the flame as if looking at something that has been kept alive successfully through a trial. Outside, the snow has not changed, but morning has a different quality than night. A small door is open to glance out into the yard. Cold air pours in, but with it comes clearer light. Smoke begins to rise from the roof as the fire strengthens. The shelter begins to stir again as well. The sound of hooves on straw is small, but solid. Morning in winter is not loud, but it is not as still as night. It carries the first motions, someone rising, a stick of wood placed into the fire, a door opening. The old man watches the light grow through the crack in the door and smiles, very faintly. The longest night has passed, at least this night. And in the small wooden house in a village in the year 1200, a quiet morning begins, not with bells or loud calls, but with pale white light on snow and a fire that continues to burn. Winter is still long, but this morning, like many mornings before it, they have crossed another night. And for the 90-year-old man, that is enough. And then, even the longest night passes. The fire does not go out. The house does not collapse. The old man is still there, beside the smoldering embers. There is no cheer when dawn arrives, only a pale gray light sliding over the snow, slowly, silently. He has made it through one more day, not through any special strength, but through habit, through community, through coarse layers of wool, a simple pot of stew, and a fire that is never allowed to die. The winter of 1200 will pass too, like so many winters before it. And perhaps the most memorable thing is not how brutal the cold was, but how human beings adapted, day by day, without noise. If you're lying in the warmth of the 21st century, notice that the simple fact of having a blanket, a room sheltered from wind, and clean water in your hands is something many people in the past could never take for granted. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If you feel your mind has slowed down a little, or your eyelids are growing heavy, then we've gone in the right direction. Tell me what time of day you're listening, and if you'd like, write one word in the comments: winter. Wishing you a truly peaceful sleep. And we'll meet again on another journey into the past.